Alright, welcome back to the Recipe Analyst. Today I'll be making sausage stuffed rigatoni with peppers and onions. And to start, I'll separate some garlic cloves before I start grating the pecorino romano cheese. You'll need about 2.5 cups of pecorino romano, so make sure you have a pretty big wedge or whatever you buy is enough to make 2.5 cups. Next, I start grating the cloves of garlic on the microplane, and you don't need to remove the skin because the skin doesn't go through the microplane when you grate it. Next, I start slicing the onion. We're looking for a half moon, so you pretty much just need to cut it in half and then cut it crossways once you have it in half. And once I have that yellow onion slice, I can get started on the bell peppers. Of course, you want to remove the stems and the cores before you go ahead and slice them. And the recipe calls for slices that are about 1/4 of an inch thick and about an inch long. So I go ahead and cut all of the bell peppers into slices about that size. Next, I'm going to heat 1/4 cup of olive oil in a heavy bottom pot over medium-high heat. And while the oil is heating up, I can add the crushed red pepper, oregano, fennel, salt, and freshly cracked black pepper to the already grated garlic. And once the oil is hot, I can add that to the oil. And once the garlic is lightly golden brown, I can add the onions and peppers. You don't want to cook the garlic for too long because it will burn pretty easily and it might make the rest of your sauce bitter and acrid. So once the peppers and onions are added, you want to stir them occasionally, and we're going to cook those for about 20 minutes or until completely softened. And while that's cooking, we'll add 4 quarts of water to a pot and season it with some salt and bring that to a boil to cook the rigatoni. You want to season the water pretty thoroughly, so we're going to use 1/2 cup of salt. And you can just let that come to a boil while we continue working on the peppers and onions. I didn't get this on camera, but after the onions and peppers were softened, I added a can of crushed red tomatoes, and then I filled the can with water and added that to the pot. And we're gonna let that simmer for about 10 minutes. And once the water comes to a boil, we can add our rigatoni to cook for 10 minutes. And after simmering for about 10 minutes, the sauce can be transferred to a large bowl, and then we can let that cool in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes or until it's ready to be mixed with the pasta later. When the pasta is done cooking, you can go ahead and strain that and then return it to the same pot and add 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and then just give that a toss to make sure that they don't stick while they cool off. Now we can go ahead and make the sausage filling for the rigatoni. So that's a pound of sweet Italian sausage, 2 eggs, 2.5 teaspoons of salt, 1/2 cup of the pecorino romano cheese, and 1 cup of the whole milk ricotta. Then you want to process it until everything is well combined. I had some lumps of sausage that didn't want to get incorporated as easily, so I pushed that down a little bit to make sure it did get combined. And then once everything is well incorporated, I transfer it to a Ziploc bag. I don't recommend using a Ziploc bag because, as you'll see in a few moments, the Ziploc bag sprung a leak before I could even cut a hole to start filling the rigatoni. So I ended up using a pastry piping bag instead. So here in that seam, the bag burst before I could even start piping. So luckily I had some pastry piping bags, and I just transferred the filling to that bag, and that made things a lot easier when it came to filling each rigatoni. So here you can see this piping bag is a lot stronger than the Ziploc bag, and it allowed me to fill the rigatoni a lot quicker and easier than it would have been using the Ziploc bag. And you just need to do this for as many rigatoni as possible. So this is the pasta I had left over, and I ended up using this clip to make piping it even easier. Next, you can add the pasta to your chilled sauce. Add all of the cheese except for a quarter cup, so you want to reserve a quarter cup of the cheese and mix everything together. And once everything is mixed, you can transfer that to a 13x9 baking dish. Even it out, and then you can top it off with the remaining Pecorino Romano cheese. Then you want to bake that for about 40 minutes and then let it rest for 15 minutes. So what did I think of this recipe? Although it takes a really long time and it takes some effort figuring out the best way to fill each piece of pasta, the end result I think is pretty worth it. The flavors are really good. You always get some sausage in every bite as long as you have a piece of pasta in it. The peppers and onions are flavorful too, so I decided to give this recipe an 8 out of 10. Anyway, if you have any recommendations for recipes you want me to try, leave them in the comments, and thanks for watching.